Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today is another webinar in our partner integration series. Today we will review the integration between Cadsoft Envisioneer Construction Suite and Epicor Bistrack. We have with us Jason from Epicor, and Jason will be showing us the integration after we do the portion of the estimating on our side. So sit back, relax. We will show you that in complete webinar, and we are taping it for you as well. So we will send you out a webinar recording link once it's completed as well. So to start off with, we're going to go through Envisioneer and do an estimate in the software. And from there, we're going to pass over the information to Bistrack. And Bistrack is a point-of-sale system, and it's going to take the information from Envisioneer, and it's going to, then Jason will show you what he can do on that side with that point-of-sale system. So to start off, let's bring in a PDF copy that we may have received that we have to do an estimate from. So to do that, I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu at the very top left screen, and then I'm going to go to Import. We can import a number of different file formats. So if you receive an estimate in a PDF format, maybe it's in an AutoCAD DWG or DXF format, or perhaps it's even just a JPEG or a bitmap scanned image. We can bring those in as well as the basis of our estimate. So we just choose which one we want to use, and I'm going to use the PDF for today, and I'll just pick one from my desktop, and from there we'll hit open. It'll bring in the PDF. When you're bringing in a PDF for an estimate, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of before you just bring it in to do the estimate. PDFs can be in two different formats. They can be a vector or a raster. A vector means that they started off in a CAD program and they know that a line is a line and text is text, and they'll come in nice and crisp and sharp, and you'll be able to pick points and it'll snap to the corners of the drawing. If it's a raster, that means they scanned it. You can still bring it in. It's still very valid, but the more you zoom in, the worse it'll look. So if I zoom in on this PDF on my screen right now, you notice the more that I zoom in, the worse it's going to look. It's going to look very pixelated because it's a raster. It's been scanned. Down the lower left-hand corner of my screen, I'm going to uncheck Convert to Image. This will see if it is a vector PDF, and now the more that I zoom in, the better it will look. It recognizes the crispness of those lines and text and dimensions that I have as part of this PDF. Also, what I may want to do is rotate this PDF. I'm going to, in the rotate box, rotate it 270 degrees, so it's got the different orientation on my screen. I can also check the scale. Never rely on the scale that's in PDF that you may see. It might say 1/4 inch, it might say an 1/8 inch, but I always like to double check just to make sure. So I'm going to zoom in on one of the dimensions that is part of this PDF, and now I'm going to calibrate this PDF just to double check on that scale. It's telling me that it's a 1:48, 1/4 inch equals a foot scale. So I'm going to pick the scale by picking 2 points of a known dimension, left click on one side of the dimension, left click on the other, and tell it that that is 12 feet. When I click OK, if this is anything but 1/4 inch equals a foot, that scale will change. It remains the same, so I can trust that scale. Zoom back out. The next thing that I want to do is to crop around what I want to bring in as part of the PDF. I don't need to bring in the title block and all the additional information. I just want to narrow down what I bring in. So when I'm bringing in information, it's just what I want to estimate. So I'm just going to left click around the first floor plan here, and that's all I want to bring in. Everything else will be disregarded. That eliminates any extra line work coming in. It could potentially slow it down. Usually in today's computers that doesn't happen as much, but the less information you can bring in, it's always the best anyway. I'm going to then dim it down. The reason I want to dim down this PDF is as I trace over top of it to create the estimate, I want to distinguish what I have estimated already and what still needs to be estimated. So if I bring this in nicely washed and light in color, when I do start to trace over top of the walls and the doors and the windows and the roof and the floor to do my estimate, it becomes obvious what I have already estimated. So I'm going to bring that down to about 60% and then click Insert. When I pick Insert, a copy of that PDF attaches to my cursor, and I simply left-click to insert it. That brings it out onto my desktop where I can start to do my estimate. From here, I then use my tools at the very top of the screen. What building component do I need to estimate? The first thing that I want to estimate is the walls. So I select the walls, and then my catalog panel to the right appears, and it shows me all different wall construction types. So I can take off the various materials. So I'm going to start off with 2x6 cement board siding. I move my cursor onto the drawing screen, and I'm going to tell it that I'm going to trace around the building with a baseline to start my estimate. That means I only have to go around and pick the corners. So I'm going to left-click on every corner that I have of my exterior walls to start off on this estimate. So I'm just going to come through, left-clicking each corner, coming down. You'll see that circle with an X. That means that it's finding the corners for me because this is a vector PDF, and it's very precisely choosing them for me. When I right-click and tell it that I'm finished picking the corners, it then brings up this dialog box. It wants to know what I've traced around. Did I trace around the outside edge of the veneer, our composite siding? Did I trace around the outside edge of our stud? Or did I trace around the inside face of our walls? So depending on the PDFs that you get into estimate from, whatever's the easiest to trace around, you can use. So I traced around the veneer, so I simply click OK, and it highlights the walls, and it now knows that I am estimating 2x6 and cement board siding. I can then choose the other walls that I want to estimate, the interior walls. So I'm going to scroll down in my list of wall types. I'm going to pick a 2x6 load-bearing wall, left-click where it's going to start, left-click where it's going to stop. I'm going to repeat that over here, left-click here, left-click at this corner, and then bring it over to this corner right here, estimating those walls. I'll grab a 2x4 interior wall, left-click where I want it to start and where I want it to stop, and it will put those in. Left-click, and I'm getting the estimate of those. Already with just this little bit of information that I put in, just tracing around the exterior and tracing over top where the interior walls are, I can go up to Tools and Analyze and generate a project estimate from that. So this is just a simple material report to check on what I'm estimating so far. So I can see already I have my ground floor wall framing. I have 92 5/8 studs. There's 186 of them. I have my house wrap, my sheathing tape, my staples, the cement board siding. There's 948 linear feet. The nails, insulation, vapor barrier, staples, drywall. As much information as I put behind those walls when I was tracing around that PDF is as much information as going to spit out into this report for me. So if you only estimate the framing information, you don't need to worry about the siding and the house wrap. You don't supply those materials. You don't have to put that information behind each one of those walls. But if you get right down to the drywall studs, the staples for the house wrap, you can put all of that information behind it. But let's look at some of this information like the studs. How did it know I needed the pre-cut stud length of 92 5/8? How did it know I had 8-foot walls? Let's go back out to our estimate out here and the PDF we were looking at to find out where it got that information. I'm going to go up to the Settings pull-down menu, and I'm going to choose Building Locations. Building Locations is where the software will look as you start to grab an element that you want to estimate. So when I was drawing those walls, it looked here first. It knows that I was drawing on the ground floor location. If you look down towards the lower left-hand corner of my screen, you can see I was drawing on the ground floor. So it looks down there, and it looks up at these settings, and it saw that my default wall height was 8 1 1/8. And when I go to put in doors and windows, it's going to hang them 6 8 off the floor, and my ceiling height is going to be 8 feet. So these are my defaults, and I can set those defaults up to anything. So if you know that the majority of your projects now have 9-foot or 10-foot ceilings, you can preset these so that they have those values already set to them. So as I was grabbing that wall from the catalog, it came up here and said, how tall are those walls? It grabbed that setting and started to draw. So So it knew those studs were at that height, and it calculated them for me. These are, again, just a default to get you started. All the walls in the software can be all various heights as well. So if we have knee walls at 4 foot, or if we have a vaulted ceiling and you have to vault the wall on a slope, it can handle those as well. Let's take a look at the information behind the walls to gather their information on where it's grabbing that vapor barrier, the studs, and all that information. I'm just going to double click on one of the highlighted walls that we've inserted already, and it will bring up its information. So as I traced over that PDF with this wall item, it knew that it was a framed wall. And from there, it knew this framing member at the bottom to use a 2x6. You can grab anything. You can grab 2x4s or any product that you need to for that framing, and it's going to use it as a default. This top and bottom tab will then go through and determine the height of the wall. Right now, as a default, these exterior walls are set to automatically extend. Later on, when we put the roof on to estimate, if the plate height of the roof changes, if it goes up to 10 foot at one section or drops down to maybe only 6 feet at another section, these walls will automatically extend to that height. So they'll see that variable of the plate height, and the walls will drop or grow accordingly. We could put in just one level and leave them at one strict height of 8 foot. We can also slope them, and we can also step them. So if you have to work underneath a staircase, because it has these values, when it's going through to estimate the drywall and the stud heights, it knows that they're all dropping down in height, and it'll automatically calculate that for you. As we're drawing the wall as well, it's also putting in trim. So if I turn this wall around to look at the inside face of it, you can see it's already got baseboard. And when I drop in windows and doors, it's automatically going to case around them as well. And I can also include any kind of exterior trim. So if you have any exterior trim that you like to include when you're doing siding, that all can be included. So as I'm drawing the wall, that's automatically ticking off and calculating the quantities that you have for that trim. But it's this very last tab here at the back end of all of our options that estimates all of the materials. This part number right here is going to be your link into Bistrack. The same part number, SKU number that you're using in Bistrack, we dump that information into Envisioneer so that they speak to each other through that part number. It also recognizes the unit of measurement. So these two key values are the information that's going to be passed back and forth from Envisioneer to Bistrack so that they can link together. This list on the right-hand side is a list of all of the assembled materials that I put together to estimate when I'm drawing that wall. So as I was tracing around those exterior walls, it knew I needed cement board siding, nails, house wrap, sheathing tape, OSB, and stick nails, all of the different items here. The quantities that you're seeing next to them, the little formulas, they're all customizable. So if you want to add in additional waste factor for different elements, maybe 10% on your siding, but maybe 20% on your drywall, that all can be customized and changed depending on how you like to calculate the materials yourself as well. So this is where it's grabbing all the information. So as I traced around, it automatically knew the quantities of all those different items. That's the same for all of the different building components that we're going to be estimating. So when I grab on doors, and I'm taken into the doors catalog now on the right-hand side, I've got my entry door, and I'm just going to left-click to insert it. So all of our items are pick the element from the building component at the top, go to the catalog panel, find the exact element that you want to find. I need some hinged interior doors. I'll left-click to install them as well. And I need a garden door at the back, and I'll grab a 60-inch garden door. With doors and windows, if you don't supply them, you don't have to insert them. You can insert them because you need that header size and the framing information, but we can turn the quantity on and off for them as well. So if I look at this double door as an example, and I go to the quantity tab, just like we had with our walls, you'll see this option, and I'm going to highlight it for us down here, include in quantities, and it's checked. For those of you that don't supply windows and doors, you just simply uncheck it from the catalog. You know you need to put in a 60-inch opening, grab the 60-inch door. It's not going to quantify the door unit itself, but you are going to get the header information over top of it and all the framing kings and jacks around it as well. And just like our walls that we looked at earlier, we can assemble information for the doors too. So every time that you quantify a door, if you want to include a lock set, hinges, jam material, anything that you would normally package out and send out with a door, you can assemble them as well, so you don't have to add that extra quantity in. It saves that extra step. So I'm going to cancel out of here. There's our doors in. And let's go back then and analyze our model and generate that project estimate again. So now when we're looking at our project estimate, we can see that there's a line item there that has our header materials. So it has different headers being put in as well. So I've got some 2x6s, 10-footers going through. How did it know to grab that material when I put in the openings? Let's go back. This is a very visual takeoff. I'm going to throw it into a 3D view. Looking down at the bottom of my screen, I've got this 3D quick view button. That allows me to look at the model in a 3D view to see everything that I've inserted so far. So as I'm looking at my model, I can see the various elements and how they're going to be inserted. So if I come up here to View, Framing Mode On Off, it'll highlight the various components differently for me. We can see that the openings are highlighted in this rose color. So if I select this opening and double click on it, it says refer to infill right now is how it's going to frame over top of that opening. So that means it's going to look back at my building locations information, which stores header sizes as well. There's a table there. So you can tell it for openings up to 8 feet, maybe you want to use two 2x10s. And anything over that, maybe you want to use some different product. You can have that, again, set as your defaults. Set up a span table, and it will recognize that. And as you punch holes into the various walls, it'll refer to it. I'm going to tell it that I want to use a custom head sill jam configuration for that particular opening, and I'll use some timber strand product. Click OK, and OK. Now if I view the framing of this model, View, Framing Mode On Off, we can see every stud in the model. We can see the top plates, bottom plates, the specified header that I put over this particular opening. So it all becomes framed for us so we can visualize it. So if we know we don't want the to put in with our framing, that we don't want to have any kind of ladder framing going in or any kind of blocking halfway up the wall, we can see that right away, come up to our building locations information where it's looking to how to frame those walls and tell it we don't want it to be blocked. We do want the 16 inches on center, double top plate, but the blocking is not required, so let's just change it to 16 inches on center, double top plate, and bottom plate. Click OK, and now it's reframed that way. Every wall can be customized in its framing as well. Just like I changed this one header over this one door, I can individually change the framing of any individual wall as well. So it's a very visual takeoff, so you can see exactly what you're taking off. Put that back into 2D and get it out of our framing. I also want to let you know that at the very end of our webinar, we will have an open question and answer time. So if you have questions about how we estimated in Envisioneer to pass the information off to Bistrack, or what Bistrack did with the information we get there, both Jason and I can answer your questions at the very end. From here, let's put in our windows. Windows are exact same as our doors. So as I go through and grab them and place them in, it's automatically going to install a header over top, put our jacks and our kings on either side as well. I'm just going to put this one window in at the back here and show you that windows can be very easily stretched. So if, again, you're not taking off windows, but you need a specific size of opening, you can stretch the windows out as you need to get that specific size. Okay? Or you can take the window itself and double-click on it to bring up its information, and even from here, you can change its height. So I can tell it that I want this to be a 3-foot window, rename it, so it appears in my material list how I want it, and go from there. Okay, so that again will have all of the framing components with it. We also have just cased openings. So if you just want to place an opening in a wall, just left click and place those in. Same thing, no door unit, no window unit, just a hole punched into the wall for you. And you can visualize and see all of those in 3D as well. Now that we have the layout of our walls and our doors and our windows and everything through our model, what we can do from here is take that model and put in a floor around it as well. So I can look at the entire perimeter of our model to see exactly what I want to insert and change for that as well. So from there, I'm just going to grab our structural floor tool, and I'm going to go structural floor. I can do it by perimeter. It'll look at the entire perimeter of the home. It'll look at each individual room that I have as well, or I can do it by picking points. So I'm going to choose picking points for today. Go into my catalog, just like I did with my walls, doors, and windows, and I see I have a 2x10 system with 3/4 inch OSB. If I double click on that, it'll show you all the various components it's going to estimate when I put in this floor. So for my floor joist, my 2x10s, my sill plate, band joist, rim joist, and if I put in an opening, it will put in the headers around it as well. So as you're putting in all of these different elements, it also is going to tell you how to put them in. So the general properties are telling me that these joists are going to go in 16 inches on center, and if they hit a bearing point, a beam, they're going to stagger by 1 foot. So there will be a 1 foot overlap over top of the beam. So let's see how this is done. I will pick points for that element. So he's going to come through and say it's going to come from here up to here, come up to this corner. Just like I picked the points, it will also recognize, I'm just showing you the one with the most detail, going through, hit finish, and to put those in, and we'll put in our floor from there. We can also turn on and off the visibility of different elements as we go through. So I want to turn on my structural floor framing to see those elements. So there's my joist running through. I can then go through and I'm going to cycle select and select my floor so that I can have it selected, the individual components, and from there I can put in a bearing point. So I want to tell it that there's going to be a beam running from here to here, and if I zoom in nice and close there, you can see they automatically overlapped the floor joist for us. I'll repeat that one more time for you. So I inserted a bearing line, I picked a point here, left click, picked a point here, left click, and it automatically overlapped them. So if I look at our project estimate, you can see that I have my floor elements in there now as well. It will see the floor joists that I'm putting in, the length of them, how many I need, going through the entire model. So as I insert things, it's all going to be calculated for me, coming through the list. Last stop, before we pass this over into our quote, I will also put on a roof. So we have a roof by perimeter command that will automatically recognize our exterior walls. We have picking points like we've done with our floor to put the roof on as well. And we also have a surfaces tool. So if you want to put the roof on individual surfaces, you can do that as well. So I'm going to do roof by picking points again. I'm going to tell it I have an 8/12 hip. That's from here, this corner, up to here, coming up, picking all those corners again, or I could let it recognize the exterior faces. And then from there, hitting finish. And it put the roof on, and if we again look at this in a 3D view, we can see the roof a little bit better. So it put an 8/12 hip on, that's what I told it I wanted on the building. And now that it's in that 3D view, we can see the 8/12 hip. With that 8/12 hip, I can make changes to it. I'm just going to left click on the roof, and when I do that, you'll see that arrows appear. They're pointing at all the individual surfaces of the roof. If the roof isn't a pure 8/12 hip, all four sides, these arrows on each side indicate the pitch, the plate height, and the style. So if I want to change any of them, I click on the arrow to make it green to let it know that I've selected that side, and from then I can change their properties. By changing their properties, I could change their pitch. So if left to right they were maybe 4/12, maybe they only had a 1 foot overhang, you can change all these values, or change the shape. In the upper left-hand corner there where it says roof shape, I can click on that hip and tell it that instead of a hip it's a gable, or it's a Dutch hip, or it's a mansard. Custom allows multiple slopes up one side. You can even have it arched or double slope. So I'll simply change it to a gable and click OK, and it automatically changes them into gables. From that information there, by coming to Analyze, generating the project estimate, I can then double check all of my values, and there I will also notice now that I have my roof framing. I did it in rasters, my roof finishes, drip edge, valley flashing, shingles. All of that information is tucked into my report that I'm going to send over to Bistrack. At the very bottom of our report, we also include general measurements. These are your way of double checking all of your various values that you have. So what is the entire roof surface area? We've got 1,551 square feet. My eave length, my gable length, my valley length, my ridge length, my hip length, interior wall surfaces, exterior. So you can just double check all of your work before you pass it over. This is information that we won't pass over to Bistrack. When we pass over to Bistrack, we want the actual SKU numbers and the units of measurements. These are just your back checking before you send it over. Okay, so now I'm going to send the information over to Bistrack. To do that, I'm going to come up to Tools, Analyze, Generate a Quote. It's a quote that we're going to send over to Bistrack. Yes, I want to update this information. Yes, I realize that we have $0. In here, it's the same quote, the same estimate that we were looking at before. But before I pass it over to Bistrack, we give you the opportunity to check on values. Maybe you want to swap out some different information. So in here, if I scroll to the very bottom of our estimate, I will see those measurement values. So if I select one by left-clicking on it, I hold down my Shift key, I can select all of these elements in the measurements that I don't want to send over to Bistrack. I can right-click and tell it to delete these items from my quote. I don't need them. If there's an item in here that I might want to change, so as I'm going through and I see interior trim, I told it that we wanted some MDF baseboard. If I come in here, I can always substitute or replace that line item with another product. So before I send it over to Bistrack, I can say, you know, instead of the MDF, they maybe want a different product, swap it out with a different SKU number, and then I can send it over. So those things are, you can kind of fine line and tune the estimate before you send it over. It's broken down into all of these various ship loads, interior doors and trim, drywall, insulation. Those are things that can all be customized as well. So depending on the ship loads and the organization of those and how you want to see them, we can reorganize that information for you as well. And then from there, I simply come up to File, and I choose Export. I'll give it a name. I'll call this Bistrack Export, and I click OK. Now it wants to know what point of sale system I want to send this over to. I'm going to choose Bistrack. Click OK, and it sets up all the products for me, getting it all ready to send over. I can tell it to maintain that quote order so that it has the headings and they can be all passed over as well. From there, at the very top of the screen, all I have to do is hit Export. When I export it, I have to give it my account ID number to go into Bistrack. I'm just going to make one up for today. Click OK. And then it wants to know, what am I bringing over to Bistrack? Is it an order or is it a quote? I recommend you always just bring over a quote, and I click OK. From there, it'll be saved on the server for Bistrack to be able to import it. So at this point, I want to change the presenter, and I'm going to allow Jason to show his magic on the Epicor Bistrack side. So Jason, I'm making you the presenter, and if you could show your screen when you're ready. And Jason, I think we might just have a little bit of an issue hearing you.
I guess it helps when I take it off mute.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Chantal. You can see my screen okay?
We can, yep.
Cool, all right. So once you've exported the file out of the Cadsoft software, it's been exported into a folder that's been pre-configured that we pull through our e-business software and bring that into Bistrack on a regular basis. Most clients pull around 1 minute, so there can be about a minute of lag time between the export and when it comes into Bistrack. Once it's been read into Bistrack, it comes over as an e-business document and is applied automatically and a document created. Now that automatic apply is optional, so you can have it come in where staff can come in and manually apply those. But it's an additional step that isn't necessary. So once it's come in and it's been applied, it's generated either a sales order or a quote in Bistrack, depending on the option you've chosen during the export. And it comes in with that same material list. It has your header information, the product information, the quantities, and the sell prices that have all come over through the export. Costs are calculated based on your average costs in Bistrack. Customer information either defaults to the Bistrack default customer, or if you had one in your export, it will bring that customer information over as well. So this way, staff also have the ability in Bistrack to go through and they can still modify the quantities, modify the sell prices in here, tweak it a little bit before printing out that quote and giving it to the customer. Once the customers come back and said, yes, that's great, we'll go with the project, you can then accept the quote into a call-off order and proceed through the call-off order process of shipping those materials out to the customer. So there isn't really much to do on the Bistrack side, as long as you've got your products mapped out correctly between the two packages. The import flows seamlessly and you come up with a quote in Bistrack without any additional work on that side. And sales reps don't have to double enter their information.
Perfect. Okay, so what we'll do then is we can open this up to any kind of questions that anybody might have on seeing the Bistrack side of everything or seeing the estimating side. So if you have a question at this time, the GoToMeeting panel that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen will allow you to type in any questions. So if you wanted to see anything on the Bistrack side or our side, type your questions in and we can answer them for you live here. So our first question that we have is, can you use EWP floor joists? And yes, we can. When we bring in all of the different elements, it's just really a naming convention that goes for them, and they can have any kind of shape. So if I share my screen again, when we're looking at the various members that we're putting in, they can have any kind of shape and size to them. So if I was to put in, 2 parallems or joists of any size and any shape, you can put those in. It's just the naming convention that's going to tell you what it is, and you can have any shape set to those. So yes, that can happen for sure. Next question. How does Envisioneer estimate framing materials for the roof? The framing materials itself is based on, depending on what it is. So we have rafters set for those, and you're looking at all of the different properties here. So when we look at specify framing, you can go through and tell it what you're using for those various elements, and you can label them, what they are, and put it in the phase for the roof framing phase, and put in their spacing for all of those different elements. Okay, that seems to be, oh, there's another question coming in. Does this produce a completed graphic, complete for use in the field for assembly as well? Yes, we do panel diagrams as well, so I can come into wall panels, and for each wall that I'm drawing, I can look at the panel diagram that's going along with it. It'll also include a little material list underneath it, and they'll all be labeled. So if I use this one as a example that I'm highlighted on here, and we take a closer look at that diagram, the value-added information that you get from it is that each wall that you have will be labeled. So if I look at the wall itself, all of my A's here are studs, and we scroll down to the list below it. We can see their actual lengths as well. So I've got my studs, and I'll just zoom out here a little bit so we can see that a little bit better. We've got our studs, what they are, how many, and the actual length that you're going to cut them to as well. So each element that you're framing will show up in this list. What about tally lengths? I have a single SKU in Bistrack that has multiple lengths, not parent-child. Will Cadsoft send the tally lengths? What you can do is add a comment line in. So when we're here in quote generator, after you have all of your product in, you can right-click and say add a comment, and that can be your tally line that you're adding in for those as well.
And to clarify on that, with those comments, they would come over as line notes into the Bistrack system, so they would be available for picking staff to see those notes and know what lengths they need to pick.
Perfect. And another question was, what about the floors? What about the floors? With the floors themselves, I'm wondering if you want to know if they can go into a list like that as well. They can. If I go back to that model and put it down into 2D as well, we have what we call a member schedule. So I can tally up all of the members that were in there for my floor, tell them what they are, what size, their actual length that I'm going to be using. So this could be the actual length, and then we have the cut length as well, the count of those. So when we're going through, you can label all of the floors too in a nice diagram for field notes as well. How do you handle items with different colors? For example, siding and roofing. In Bistrack, each color has its own product number. How does that get defined in Envisioneer? It would be the exact same way. So when I'm looking at this roof and I'm looking at the shingle product that you're using, what I would do with the estimate is I would leave it on one generic shingle item to go into quote generator, and so you're not having thousands of different choices that you can deal with. And then when you get into quote generator, that's when you can right click and say I want to substitute or replace this item, and they're going to be using a different shingle style. Instead of having the architectural detail black shingle, they've decided to use the brown shingle, and maybe it's the builder series, and go from there. So you could replace it here, and instead of having thousands of choices for colors and numbers as product choices in Envisioneer, I would just do the replace. I would do that as well for trim. Put in maybe your builder basic option for your trim and your shingle, so you know you're always starting off with those, and then do the replace before you send it off into Bistrack. So you'll get the linear footage, you'll get how many bundles of shingles you're going to require, and then from there you can replace it with a different product.
And optionally, you do have the substitute option in Bistrack as well. So you could leave it generic for that export, and then once it's in Bistrack in the quote, you could do the substitution on that side as well.
Perfect. How about manufacturer's doors? Do I have to create individual SKUs for every door and swing, or can I push data to a kit, maybe a bill of material kit? Yes, absolutely. You can do that too. So instead of having all of your doors in there, we could handle it the same way. We could do a replace at the end, or if you wanted to put in every SKU number for every swing, you can handle it that way. But again, that's lots of choices. So if you wanted to just put in a generic kit and then at the end replace it, you can do that once they've made their defined door, window, and finished material choices. You can do that for sure.
Yeah, so the integration won't build the kit in Bistrack, so it won't do that manufacturing process with the work order and choosing all your what's the height, what's the swing, what's your width. All that information doesn't get passed across to build that manufactured kit like we have in Bistrack. So that is where you would use that substitution or use it as a sort of base product that generates the work order, and then do that kit process separately. But yes, currently we don't get that information over for each defined option within that door. With the bill of materials options that has come out in Bistrack, you could pass along those bill of materials products and have that come through in the integration. But again, it's probably one of those, it'd be better to do that substitution at a later point and have a generic door rather than have 99,000 different types of doors that you need to choose.
Perfect. Next question is, can you show us how to change the section header description, please? Yes, so when I'm looking at, we'll put on the roof as an example here, properties, and go to the quantity tab, every element has the opportunity for a phase, and they have a usage. So when I'm looking at all of the products as part of my roof, they're all going to go to this roof framing phase. So these phases are just a list of names that you can change them to. So if I wanted to put my floor framing on the floor framing floor system, instead of being floor system, maybe you call it something else, you can add or edit these phases to be any name that you want them to be. These are unlimited on what you want to name them and how many there are. If you have a numbering ID that you want to put with them as well, you can put that numbering ID in there as well. From there, they all get put into that list. So every element that's in here has a phase and an ID and a usage put to it. So this is exterior openings phase for the door, and its usage is a door, so that they all get labeled in there correctly. When we import your information from Bistrack, so you take all of your Bistrack SKUs, you get them to export them out for you. We dump them here into Envisioneer, and we get you to fill out a little workbook. And part of that workbook that we get you to fill out includes information on all of your ways that you want to organize your information. So how you typically, products you typically estimate for roofs and walls and floors, and how you want them organized in that list. We always get a sample of your current quotes so that we can organize them the same way.
And if those sections match in Bistrack, it does generate a Bistrack order section as well.
Perfect. There was a comment put up there that that says the graphic for the floors. Can you comment a little bit further on what you want to see with the graphic for the floors? Is that the material choices that you have? If you wanted to offer finished materials, we certainly do that too. We have different floors, so I mean, if you wanted to show them the difference between, this country natural hickory and laminate and parquet and different hardwood finishes and ceramics, those are all brought in and used as JPEGs and bitmaps. So if while you're estimating, you also wanted to kind of have a value-added service of showing the various materials too and different choices, you can take a digital picture of any kind of finish and feed it into the software so they can see exactly what that shingle is going to look like with that particular siding. So if that's what you meant, that would be great. Okay, that was our last question up there. So I do want to hold the line for another moment, just in case someone is typing out a question or something comes to mind. Jason, is there anything else you wanted to comment on before we did end off the webinar, if there's no further questions?
No, just thank you for organizing this, and looking forward to any questions that come up from outside of this as well. Perfect.
Okay, so again, we did tape today's broadcast, and we will be putting that up on our Cadsoft YouTube channel and sharing that with Bistrack Epicor as well. So if you wanted to see a copy, just contact Jason or myself, and we'll make it available for you, and we'll send you out the link. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation as part of our Integration Partner webinar series, and I hope to see you in another webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.